Good day to you. Today we're going to be talking about how Jesus is in the Old Testament. More specifically, how he's in every book of the Old Testament. Now, we may not get to the whole list today because it's a very exhaustive list, but we will be taking a look at a few of them, starting with the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament written by Moses. Just because we don't get to the rest of them does not mean that Jesus is not in each and every one of them. Now in Genesis 3:15, he is the man God, or God-man, who will step on the enemy's head. He will crush his head. And the enemy likes to strike us as humans to derail us from furthering God's promises. In Exodus, there is the blood on the doorpost, which is symbolic of Jesus. In verses 7 and then again in 12 to 13, Jesus is our sacrificial lamb. And the blood on the doorpost saved the Israelites from destruction and doom from being killed. Just like Jesus, our sacrificial lamb's blood is able to save us from hellfire. Now, Leviticus is all about the priests and the law and keeping the law. Jesus was our high priest. He is our mediator, even still to this day, our mediator between God and man. And he's the perfect law keeper. And not only is he's the perfect law keeper, he also perfects the law. You can't get any better than that. Now in Numbers, God was the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. That's Jesus. He's our eternal light. In Revelation, it says heaven does not need light because Jesus is light. Revelation 22:5. Now in Deuteronomy 18:15, God shows himself speaking directly to Moses. He's talking about God will raise up a prophet like me from among you, and you must listen to him. Well, Jesus, of course, is God's son. He's perfect, and he was the prophet like me, as God the Father has said. Now, in Joshua, what a beautiful book. First of all, Jesus is obedient to doing exactly what Joshua 1:8 says, which is to have the word constantly, the word of God constantly on your lips. And he did this exact thing in Matthew 4:1 through 11 when he was tempted. Jesus is also our deliverer, just like Joshua was with Rahab in Joshua 6:23 through 25. Joshua led the Israelites out of the to the promised land, and Jesus has made a way through salvation in him for us to go to our promised land, heaven, to be with him eternally. Judges is a very good reminder that we could be so misled by our decisions that we make and in whom we make them, as in people elected. Just like God had to rescue the Israelites from the judges that they had selected, or because of their lack of faith and trust in him, Jesus also rescues us in the same way all the time and every day. We all make decisions that are not the best for us, but in God's tender love and kindness, he delivers us. Jesus does that for us. In Ruth, Jesus is our kinsman redeemer. Just as Boaz redeemed Ruth, Jesus redeems us. And that's found in Ruth 4:1 through 10. Now, 1st and 2nd Samuel, we'll combine all the 1st and 2nds here. 1st and 2nd Samuel, Jesus is considered the son of God, or son of David. And yet, Jesus was born and created, or was God, I should say, from the very beginning before David was born. There we go. That's in Matthew 22:43 through 45. A concept like this can only be perceived with spiritual eyes, and one we don't have time to discuss today, but would be rather interesting for sure. First and Second Kings tells us about Solomon and all his wealth and wisdom. Well, God is the greatest of all wealth and wisdom. He is far more wise than Solomon ever could be considered. He's the one that gave Solomon his wisdom. And Matthew 12:42 is where Jesus says that someone greater than Solomon has risen, talking of himself. And in Colossians 2:3, Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Isn't it fantastic we have someone we can call on? Now, we are going to be wrapping this up today. We don't have time for anything further, but thank you so much for being here with us today.